sponsored by Squarespace. Shadowlands happened. I'm sorry to remind you it did, but it did, and for many of us, it broke Warcraft's lore, and we've talked about its failures to death. There's no denying that Shadowlands happened, that it's canon, but Blizzard are actually trying to fix that. But how do you deal with a problem like Shadowlands? Do you just ignore it? Do you quietly forget about it? Well, that's one option, but here's another approach: to take the bits that did work and then to run with it. And also to, in a book, retcon some of the most disastrous things. And that's what we're seeing in the game right now, because patch 11.2 has brought back some of the best, it's quietly forgotten the worst, and when we picked up Chronicle Volume 4 and did a little bit of reading, we've even seen a few things be retconned. But going in-game, we see Venari is back. She's seamlessly picked up from where she left off. It's pretty slick. The brokers have been given an origin that disconnects them from the Shadowlands and reconnects them to the actual game world that we do care about. And then some of the deeper mysteries, like Anima, Devourers, and the first ones, well, they have been reintroduced in a way that does not break the lore, because some of those things are no longer what we thought they were during Shadowlands, and I mean that in a good way. So, the question today is simple: are Blizzard saving the Shadowlands lore? Or, should I say, saving World of Warcraft from the Shadowlands lore? Whenever people send me things, first impressions count. And that's where today's sponsor, Squarespace, can let you make that strong first impression so you actually get through to the people you want to get through to. And today, they're easier, faster, and less fictitious than anyone else, and that's all because of the new way that you build a site. And I'll walk you through it. So first, Blueprint guides you through making your own template, and this really is amazing. It helps you select what pages you want, what fonts are best, what color palette to use, and by them, of course, doing the hard work of curating all of those and making it all just work, they keep you right. And that also extends to them adding new features. You can sell digital and physical products, there's courses, there's bookings for physical and digital, and there's even native video. Yes, native, not just an embed. Which basically just means it looks and feels way better and way more pro. Now, it's all designed to work together, and rather than be a bunch of cobbled together features with inconsistent design, it's actually seamless and professional so that your customers actually have a great first impression, which is what you want. And whenever they convert, well, you have seamless buying with Squarespace payments. They really are the complete package, everything that you need, and by following my link, squarespace.com/BellularGaming, you get to build your site for free. And then when you're ready to send it live, my code BellularGaming gets you 10% off your first purchase of a site or domain. We just watched Venari rock up to Soulscribe. She had the essence of Koresh in her hand, a literal part of her planet's world soul. And it looked quite familiar. It looked like something that we would see in Zereth Mortis. Sorry to trigger you, just maybe a bit more purple. But that got me thinking. Venari's back. Devourers are in play again alongside the brokers. But how far are they going to take it? Are they still saying that world souls are connected to the first ones, whatever the first ones may be? Of course, the first ones being that piece of Shadowlands lore so controversial that it made us question everything we thought we knew about the setting. In a bad way. And if you aren't sure what a Shadowlands era first one was, well, we never met them, but basically, they were kind of like the Pantheon god people that came before all the other god people that we've known. To people, it wasn't that satisfying. Now, you could say it's a little bit like, say, you got the first generation of Greek deities, and then the second generation of Greek deities, but it just didn't work in World of Warcraft. Then I went a little bit deep, and that's when I realized something. The first ones have been quietly retconned, yes, and the Jailer's final warning has been gutted. And the upshot of this is so much of the overcomplicated cosmic stuff has been brought down to ground, where it's finally understandable. And that's when I realized that they are basically saving what they can from the Shadowlands in a way that's positive for the health of the game. But let's set the scene. For anyone who may not know why Shadowlands is so very controversial, I'll put a fine point on it. Better still, I'll let Blizzard do it for me. Check out this panel from GDC 2023. First problem, the Afterlife setting wasn't accessible. Second problem, the new antagonist wasn't developed. That new antagonist was the Jailer. Finally, well-known story heroes were diminished. Looking at you, Arthas, Garrosh, Ner'zhul, Kel'Thuzad, and many more. So, as of 2023, we see that Blizzard are aware. But like I said, they obviously can't just ignore it, especially when things happened to characters, like say Anduin, that simply cannot be undone. But let's see how they've actually pulled this off. We've only been back to the Shadowlands a few times since that horrible expansion ended. In the Blood Elf Heritage chain, we went to Maldraxxus and Bastion. Why? Well, it was to find ways of making sure that Scourge souls stayed dead. And it's really all light touch stuff. We kind of go to the Shadowlands, but not really that much, and the bad bits of the Shadowlands aren't really dealt with. But then, of course, Anduin came back, and we knew it was coming. But here's the problem. He was still fundamentally, totally traumatized by a Shadowlands arc. It's hard to ignore that, and for a character like him, it's kind of right to be traumatized by that. Seriously, it was pretty damn horrible. The Calling short story then comes in and does a great job of showing his journey toward healing those wounds. Then we joined him in Khazalgar, where Faerun reintroduced him to the light. It's obviously been a while since then. At last we heard he was well on his way to rehabilitation. That will mean we will have a post-Shadowlands fixed-up Anduin. But it's not enough to rehab Anduin, but it also had to rehab the overall Warcraft setting. And that brings us to the world of Koresh, the homeworld of the Ethereals, introduced into the game with the Burning Crusade, but it's also now where the Brokers have came from. Now, we long speculated that the Brokers and Ethereals shared a connection. It was quite obvious visually. They both had cartels, they were traders, kind of looked similar. Now we know that they were another group of Koreshi who escaped their planet's destruction. Essentially, some fled into the Twisting Nether, they would be the Ethereals we met in TBC. Others crafted containment suits and fled into the Shadowlands. And that's why Tazavesh was in between the realms of the Shadowlands. Basically, they were refugees hiding out in the cracks of reality. Tazavesh itself, well, it's been revealed as one of the city-states that existed on Koresh, where it was ruled by this guy, Bellular, a name that may be familiar to the mages and priests listening because he was in your artifact quests back in Legion. Now, you can see how they're weaving the bits of Shadowlands that worked into the long-established lore, and doing that with characters we're familiar with. It's a satisfying reintroduction for the Brokers, but the pinnacle of it is, of course, the one character that we can all agree rocked during Shadowlands, and that is Venari. The Maw was supposed to be the most brutal place in reality, one inspired by Dark Souls, and heading there, hiding in a cave, we found Venari. We traded her mountains of Stygia, and in return she taught us her rules of survival. She seemed a bit paranoid, a bit unhinged. Then, much later in Zereth Mortis, she found a way to escape the Shadowlands, and she even faked her own death. Strange enough end to a quirky character. But what was she actually doing there? Well, we can now look at the results. She returned to Koresh, and she used the massive wealth that she had gathered, partially via us, to set up the ecodomes. The ultimate one being Aldani. And at the end of that process, well, she brought her world back to life. And when that happens, she explains that the Maw was the closest thing to Koresh that she could find in the universe, and if she could understand it, she could save her world. I don't really know what she means, but whatever, it basically works. I'm willing to let that slide. The Shadowlands didn't explain Venari's motivations, though. She was just there as a mystery. In fact, the Brokers were just these hyper-mysterious dudes who liked to trade. We knew they gathered knowledge, wealth, and technology, but we did not know why. Seems like a fundamental flaw of that expansion storytelling. But now it's clear they were working towards one day going home, back to Koresh. And with how Blizzard have handled it, it's natural, it's smooth, they haven't needed to be smashed back into the lore. It feels natural. Now, Venari is still scheming and sarcastic. She still plays her cards close to her chest. But we now know she was trying to save what was left of Koresh. So it's an evolution of the Shadowlands lore that fits. Now, she references the past. She calls us Mawwalker, savior of Koresh, after we downed Demencius, so she remembers. We remember, and you know what? It doesn't suck. A lot of other bits of Shadowlands did, but these bits basically didn't. Narratively anyway, I don't think anyone really enjoyed the Maw. But she's not the only thing back from the Shadowlands. We also see the Devourers, and they are now at the bottom of the food chain. It's no coincidence that we fight Dimensius the All-Devouring in a patch where the Devourers from Shadowlands show up. Something important is happening here. Check out this text on this patch 11.2 mount. When one cosmically invasive threat meets another, sometimes the smaller ends up on the menu of the larger, which really does put the Devourers in their place. Because once upon a time, they were the first hints at a massive cosmic conflict, one that has been quietly retconned out of the lore, and that is what is to come. Something that basically turned into a bit of a meme in the community, because as the jailer died, that is what he warned us about. You know, a cosmos divided cannot stand against what is to come. That was the beginning of an arc under the game's then creative director that it seems will never see the light of day. And that was an arc that basically was zooming out in the cosmos. But of course, in doing that, it meant that was kind of saying that the things that we had cared about, that we actually liked about the Warcraft setting, were no longer nearly as important in the Warcraft setting, meaning that it just diluted the Warcraft setting. A lot of work has actually been done in the background, because now Blizzard are landing the most controversial aspects of the Shadowlands lore. They're fixing it. Remember this guy, Fareem? He was mad. He's the one who kept telling us that we were idiots for not understanding his First One's lore. Well, turns out he was the idiot the entire time, because that stuff has just been dropped. In Chronicle Volume 4, we get some key insights. Remember, Chronicle Volume 4 came out last year, so firmly not in that sordid era of Warcraft writing. One of the things in Chronicle 4 that is changed, or recontextualized, is the jailer's warning. He said we wouldn't be able to fend off what is to come, but he never really told us what he thought was to come. And now, as it turns out, he did not know what was to come. It's quite interesting. Chronicle explains something here. While Zovaal was the arbiter of the Shadowlands, so before he got trapped in the Maw and was a big bad guy, he glimpsed into countless mortal souls, and he kinda just felt that something bad was coming. No name, no definition, just bad vibes. So yeah, bad vibes were to come. Now he tried to tell the other Eternal Ones about all these bad vibes, but they basically said, it's probably all part of the First One's plan. Don't worry about it. Zovaal then, kicked off all of his jailer stuff. He had a big old civil war in the afterlife, and then he was trapped in the Maw until we turned up. Now, it makes his motivations as a villain worse, but it does stop the setting from being held back by some random cosmic threat, which is good. But you just heard me say the First Ones, and that's the big thing. The First Ones. The Titans of the Titans, the guys who built the universe. I mean, even looking at stuff that was First One's architecture, it clearly appeared to be in the same lineage as that of the Titans. Well, here is where Chronicle does a slight change that's big. Instead of the First Ones being the gods of the gods, now, canonically, the First Ones are just a myth. They are just a myth that people in the Shadowlands believe. Something that they think is true, but that may not necessarily be true. And that pokes holes in the foundations of the Shadowlands lore. And it does so in a way that means we can just kind of forget that they existed. We can chalk it up to a weird myth that people in the afterlife believe about how stuff works. Now, you could probably rationalize this. You can maybe say, well, perhaps it is the Titans who actually went and did something in the Shadowlands and then went off and did something else. And to the beings of the Shadowlands, those Titans are called the First Ones, and they never understood the difference. Or something like that. Could be the case. But basically, all of that huge, suffocating lore has been cut. And that leaves the future wide open. Okay, so we got retcons, recontextualizations, and reintroductions. It's clear that Blizzard are doing some heavy goddamn lifting to rehabilitate the Shadowlands, but that's actually not the end. Looking to the future, there's a big opportunity to do the same thing for other characters. Sargeras is back in The Last Titan. Almost certainly, right? But here's the thing with Sargeras. It was almost certainly a character from the Shadowlands who engineered Sargeras' downfall in the first place. That character is Sire Denathrius, the sire of the Dreadlords. The Dreadlords being the group who basically psyoped Sargeras into turning into, well, Sargeras, the bad guy that we know. Of course, Sire Denathrius escaped justice in the end, and he has been sulking about with his Nathrezim ever since. So, if we're going to see a change in Sargeras, we'll have to get to the bottom of why he went over the edge. And that would be a perfect time to reintroduce Denathrius. and make him face some consequences. Nothing here is set in stone, but it does illustrate how we can't just ignore the Shadowlands lore, because unfortunately, it did actually happen, and this isn't like in, say, comic books where we can just go and do a full reboot. Hard to do that in a big live game. So instead, Blizzard have got surgical. They're willing to do the work to reintroduce the bits that were good and to fix the stuff that essentially broke the lore. And that means we'll never see a return of its biggest themes or perhaps its mysteries. Don't expect the Primus to pop out in The Last Titan to slap some sense into Aman'Thul. No, that won't happen. But do expect to see little bits from the Shadowlands, but done in a way that makes sense. So, with that said, tell me what you think down below. I'm sure that this is something we'll be debating for quite a long time indeed. And while a lot of this stuff has been fixed up pretty quickly, yeah, Koresh has been a little bit of a hard left turn, especially for some of the people who expected the War Within to more fully deal with Bellular, to fully go within the planet and deal with the World Soul. But of course now it's clear that that is something set up for the World Soul saga instead, which probably will be better for the overall story. And if this has whetted your appetite, well, check out this breakdown of Koresh's deepest lore next. I think you'll get a big kick out of it, and it'll help you understand and enjoy a lot of 11.2 more.